When you think of a bad person, who do you immediately think of? More specifically, what are the traits that make them a bad person? What are those unwanted traits, those undesirable traits, those things which, if somebody possesses them, then you can't stand them, or that you immediately judge them because it's just unacceptable in some way, shape, or form? All of that material is golden material for what we're talking about today, where I want to introduce the idea of shadow work, specifically within this incredible book. You'll probably get a bit sick of me saying this by now, but Romancing the Shadow. I'm only recommending the top books in this library, and with good reason. And this, out of all the books that I've said are beautiful, contain beautiful writing, this really, really will appeal to a lot of people if you like poetic style writing. And like I say, I want to introduce this idea of shadow work. Another way of saying shadow work is unconscious material. So if you think about who you are as a conscious person, the unconscious is surrounding that process. It's things that you could have access to, but maybe at this point in time you don't have access to them. It might be certain traits or qualities which in the moment you realize that you need, and you can bring up and you can summon those forwards, but it might be some that you actually have buried away that are just fundamentally unacceptable ways of being. So what we need to try to do is try to reclaim those. We need to try to romance the shadow, realizing why it is that we have relegated certain things to the deepest, darkest shadows, and also realizing on the other side of it as well, what are some of the benefits of this at the higher side, what might be referred to as the golden shadow. Now, I want to frame this video out just with two very, very simple quotes, because they'll give you an idea about how beautiful the writing is to begin with in this book anyway. So right at the very, very beginning, on page 23, where the ego weaves together the world, the shadow unravels the world. Whereas the ego acts as a catalyst of creation in the world, the shadow acts as a catalyst of destruction. Whereas the ego supports the status quo, the shadow is an agent of transformation. Notice how I'm saying it's transformation. It's not saying that it's necessarily a terrible thing. Even this idea of destruction, although you might immediately think of it as creative, good, destruction, bad, when we start to reclaim this nuance within that argument, we might start to realize sometimes things need to be destroyed for the overall good, not just within yourself, but within something wider as well. It's realizing where is it that we have come to maybe a premature judgment or evaluation of something based on a label. And actually, we need to really start to address that. We need to explore it and consider it further. Sometimes the creative approach towards life needs to take a bit of a backseat as well. That's not always the panacea. It's not always a good thing. Sometimes destruction needs to take a center stage with it all. So when we start to understand shadow work, what we're trying to understand is, what is it that we have pushed out in ourselves that is still there and it's still operating, but underneath our conscious awareness? And why is it that we need to pull that further upwards to make sure that we're aware of it, so that we can start to grapple with it, that we can actually then learn the lessons from this overall? And it could be, for example, that we all will have shadow material based on our unique situation growing up, whether it's to do with families, to do with friends, to do with school. Our environment is going to have a huge part to play in all of this. Think about what traits were acceptable or unacceptable in your family. What is it that you're allowed to be, and what is it that you are not allowed to be? How then, when you went to school, did that wedge become even narrower still? At school, what was actively encouraged or discouraged compared to other traits? Let's say, I'm assuming at this point in time you're an adult. If you're at least in your 20s and you're in the modern working world, what traits have narrowed your wedge down even further? Maybe as a child, you could actually accept in this area here all these different traits within yourself, and slowly they've been whittled away. Where now, if we get to our modern day life, we've got this tiny wedge that's left. And when we start to think about it, we can start to accurately describe our entire personality with just 4 or 5 words. And that isn't enough to be able to deal with all the problems in the modern world. And it's just unsuitable for us to be able to deal with it all. We need to be able to how to re-engage and actually emerge and make that wedge wider still, to be able to really engage with who we are and who we could become, so that we can start to grasp that future that we're trying to move towards as well. And this is, again, page 43, another beautiful quote in here, just to help frame this out even further. When we're trying to understand this idea, we could start to think about it as like reading a letter that's been unopened, like a letter that we've written from ourselves. So just to quote directly from this: like letters left unopened, their messages remain mute and their gifts unreceived. Romancing the shadow means opening the letters and hearing the messages from hidden parts of ourselves. Romancing the shadow means listening to the voices that have been silenced and honouring what it is they have to say. To learn to romance the shadow, we need, first of all, to be able to imagine the shadow characters hiding in our own souls. Again, can you see what I mean about the beautiful language and all of this? And it helped me realize certain things that I would have considered as completely unacceptable. So as a personal example in all this, I would have never been able to see myself or accept myself as a jealous person. That doesn't mean I actually wasn't jealous at all. It just means that I couldn't even notice when I was acting in a jealous or envious way, because it was so fundamentally unacceptable to me. And my idea of myself, based on how I grew up, based on my particular conditions, that a quality like that cannot possibly be good. So you can banish it out. You can throw it onto other people. You can project it onto other people. And that's fine. You can judge them for it. But you've got to realize that if you're going to project that out onto another person, look where it came from. Look at my hand actions as I'm doing it. It came from in here, and I projected it out onto that other person. So what I need to do is I need to realize, oh, actually, if I follow that line back, it starts with me. And as a result, what can I do about this? When I think about something like jealousy and envy, how is it that, like I said before about the destructive elements, how is it that sometimes destruction can be a good thing? Another way of saying this, how is it that jealousy can be a good thing? Well, if I'm jealous about another specific person and I can highlight specifically in them what it is that I'm jealous of, then that's telling me that I desire that thing. It might be that trait, it might be that quality, it might be something that they have, whatever else it might be. It might be the status, it might be the fame, it might be the money, it might be the articulation, it might be the wisdom, it might be the amount of friends. What doesn't matter what it is. As long as I can focus in on what that is, then I can learn more about myself and realize, oh, actually, the reason why I'm judging them so harshly is because that is missing within me, or it's bringing up a charge within me. And as a result, now I need to do something about it. But if I don't realize that's the process that's going on, and I also don't like that feeling, all that's going to happen is I'm going to judge that other person unnecessarily harshly, and I'm going to be in the same situation, and it's going to get worse over time because I can't accept that jealousy within me, and I've got no practical plan to be able to deal with that jealousy either. So really, when we start to think about romancing the shadow, it's starting to understand that, okay, I have to be vulnerable. I have to accept that within me, there's a trait here that I don't particularly like and that I'm struggling with. Maybe it's at this point in time, it's gone from being outside of my awareness. If you imagine like this is the trait of jealousy, it's behind me. I can't see it. It's not in my conscious awareness whatsoever. If I can bring it round to, I'll bring my hand in a little bit further here. It's just in my peripheral vision at this point in time. I can just about see it, but it's still not accepted. Let's say then I start to move it out over here. Then I can start to peek at it and I can start to realize, oh, actually, when I look at this, it's not as bad as I first thought. I can start to see it here for what it is. It's still at a distance from me, but I can start to see it and accept it. It's definitely a lot healthier than it was over here or over here. Now it's just over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to slowly bring it further forwards. Okay, I can't accept all of this jealousy. It's all a bit too much, but I can accept 10% of it, 20% of it. And then I'm going to move it closer and closer and closer up until it's a part of me. Up until then I can realize, oh, actually, this negative trait that I've been carrying with me all this time, if I just learn how to accept it and embrace it, suddenly life becomes a lot easier. Because realistically, what's happened is when I've seen that other person that I don't like for whatever reason, what I've realized is there's a desired future that I want, and I'm seeing it through that other person. I'm learning about myself through that other person. So as a result, I've got this plan now in place. I'm here and I don't like this certain element of what it is to be here. I really like that element of what it is to be them over there. And again, this is very much like in an imagined sense. I don't know their life fully. But the idea is that I've got a point A, where I am now. I've got a point B, where I want to move towards. Now I've just got to put a plan in place here to do that. But that can only take place if I learn to accept within myself that quality that I've projected onto another person, and then I retrace those steps. And then as a result, because of that jealousy, I can now then move with integrity towards the future that I want to move towards. It's helped me realize why I put certain people on pedestals. It's helped me realize why I hate certain other people or have a strong dislike for them. And it's why I've realized I've not been able to make much room for certain qualities within myself, even though I know realistically it probably could have been a good thing for me to be able to encourage that within myself. This is realistically in the top 5 books of my library so far. I'll probably go as far as to say top 3 if I'm perfectly honest, because I can use this book over and over and over again. And I know for a fact, because I've read this twice now, I'll be reading this every single year and learning from it every single time as well. There's so many practical suggestions in this. There's so many journaling prompts. There's so many metaphors and analogies. It's so useful. And it's all in service to this here. Illuminating the dark side of the soul. The parts that I otherwise couldn't see, realizing that I can't just sit here and do it all in one. I've got to see this as a system, as a process throughout my life. That's what reading is for me in general, and that's what reading books like this are specifically. That's why this is in the top 3. And I'm glad I've got this beautiful hardback golden cover, because this really is genuinely a golden book. So please, going back to that example before, you've written a load of letters to yourself, but you've just left them all unopened and unread. Please have the courage to even just open one of those letters and see what the gift is, see what the message is within it, and what you can learn from this. Because I can guarantee if you've written it to yourself, you've written it to yourself for a reason. So have the courage and the bravery to be able to open it up. And at the very least, learn how to look at it and then bring it closer and closer and closer within yourself until you learn how to accept it. And then you can move into the world in a much more embodied, integrated, whole way. Oh, I love this book. Top 3 material, Romancing the Shadow by Connie, Zweig and Steve Wolfe.